Woman pregnant for 15 years delivers a dinosaur-like baby. How did this happen? To find out, watch the video to the end. But first, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to get more stories like this. Maggie had always wanted to be a mother. As a young woman, she often daydreamed about holding her baby in her arms, rocking it to sleep, and nurturing it into adulthood. But her journey to motherhood had been anything but ordinary. In fact, it had defied all logic and comprehension. 15 years earlier, Maggie had been a vibrant 28-year-old, thrilled to learn she was expecting her first child. She and her husband, Paul, had celebrated with their families, imagining the joy their baby would bring to their lives. The first trimester had been uneventful, and Maggie approached her pregnancy with optimism, even embracing the usual nausea and fatigue as signs that everything was progressing well. However, as the months passed, something strange began to happen, or rather, not happen. Maggie's belly grew at a steady pace, but as she approached the 9th month, the expected signs of labor never came. At first, her doctors were unconcerned. They assured her that every pregnancy was unique and that babies sometimes arrived later than anticipated. Weeks turned into months, and Maggie's anxiety grew. She visited countless specialists, each of whom conducted tests, scans, and blood work. The results were baffling. The baby appeared healthy on ultrasounds, its tiny heartbeat steady and strong, yet it seemed entirely unready to be born. Doctors were puzzled, offering little explanation beyond vague assurances that her body might simply need more time. By the end of the first year, Maggie's joy had turned to confusion and despair. Friends and family who had once shared in her excitement now regarded her with a mix of pity and skepticism. Rumors began to spread. Some whispered that Maggie was fabricating her pregnancy for attention, while others speculated that she was suffering from a rare psychological condition. Paul tried to be supportive, but as the years wore on, the strain took its toll. He struggled to reconcile the love he felt for Maggie with the growing weight of their predicament. By the 5th year, their marriage had unraveled. Paul left, unable to cope with the constant uncertainty and the judgment of others. Maggie was devastated, but she resolved to carry on, clinging to the hope that one day, her baby would be born. By the 10th year, Maggie had grown used to the stares and whispers. She had long since stopped explaining her situation to others, retreating into a life of solitude. Despite everything, she remained determined to protect the life growing inside her, no matter how long it took. Her body had adjusted to its peculiar state. Though she had initially feared for her health, her regular checkups revealed no signs of complications. The baby remained active, its movements a constant reminder that she was not alone. Over time, Maggie developed an extraordinary bond with her unborn child, speaking to it daily and imagining the life they would one day share. Then, in the 15th year, everything changed. It started as a faint discomfort one evening as Maggie sat in her small apartment, knitting a tiny sweater for the baby she still believed would one day arrive. The sensation was unfamiliar, a low, dull ache deep in her abdomen. At first, she dismissed it, thinking it might be indigestion. But as the hours passed, the pain grew sharper and more insistent. By midnight, Maggie realized she was in labor. Panic set in as she grabbed her phone and called an ambulance. The paramedics arrived quickly, their expressions a mix of professionalism and disbelief as they loaded her onto a stretcher. Maggie tried to explain her situation, but their skepticism was palpable. She could hear them murmuring to each other as they rushed her to the hospital, their voices tinged with doubt. When they arrived at the emergency room, Maggie was greeted with similar reactions. Nurses and doctors exchanged incredulous glances as they reviewed her medical history. Despite their doubts, they prepared for the delivery, hooking Maggie up to monitors and administering pain relief. The labor was unlike anything the medical team had ever seen. Hours passed, and Maggie's body seemed to defy the usual progression of childbirth. The baby's heartbeat was strong, but its position remained unusual, and the doctors struggled to understand what was happening. Finally, after nearly 18 grueling hours, the moment arrived. The delivery room fell silent as the baby emerged. The lead doctor, Dr. Patel, froze, his hands trembling as he lifted the newborn into view. The nurses gasped, and one dropped her instrument tray with a loud clatter. Maggie, exhausted but alert, strained to see her child. "What's wrong?" she asked, panic rising in her voice. "Is my baby okay?" Dr. Patel hesitated, his eyes wide with shock. "Maggie, your baby, it's unlike anything we've ever seen." He carefully handed the newborn to a nurse, who wrapped it in a blanket and placed it in Maggie's arms. The room seemed to hold its breath as Maggie looked down at her child for the first time. Her baby was not human. The creature nestled in Maggie's arms was undeniably alive, its chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Its body was covered in smooth, reptilian scales, its tiny hands ending in sharp, claw-like fingers. Its face bore a striking resemblance to a dinosaur, with a small snout and bright, intelligent eyes that blinked up at her curiously. Maggie's mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. She had imagined this moment for 15 years, picturing a chubby, pink-cheeked infant with a toothless smile. But this was something entirely different. Yet as she held the creature close, she felt an overwhelming wave of love and protectiveness. It didn't matter what her baby looked like or where it had come from. This was her child, and she was its mother. The medical team scrambled to regain their composure, their professional instincts kicking in as they began examining the baby. Dr. Patel ordered a battery of tests, his voice strained as he tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. Maggie refused to let the baby out of her sight, clutching it tightly as the nurses hovered nearby. She could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken questions hanging in the air. "What is this?" one nurse whispered to another, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," the other replied. "But whatever it is, it's alive." As the initial shock began to wear off, Dr. Patel approached Maggie cautiously. "Maggie," he said gently, "we need to understand what we're dealing with here. I know this is a lot to take in, but we have to run some tests on your baby." Maggie nodded, her grip on the baby tightening. "Do whatever you need to do," she said. "But please, be gentle." The following hours were a blur of activity as Maggie's baby became the center of attention at the hospital. Doctors, nurses, and specialists were summoned to examine the newborn, their expressions a mix of fascination and disbelief. Maggie remained by her baby's side, refusing to leave the small observation room where the medical team had set up their equipment. The baby, whom Maggie had decided to name Theo, seemed unbothered by the flurry of attention. He blinked up at the bright lights, his tiny clawed fingers curling and uncurling as he made soft cooing sounds. Despite his reptilian features, there was an undeniable gentleness in his movements, a sense of curiosity that melted Maggie's heart. Dr. Patel returned with a portable ultrasound machine and several vials for blood tests. "Maggie," he began carefully, "we're going to run some basic tests to understand Theo's physiology. I promise we'll be as gentle as possible." Maggie nodded, watching intently as the team worked. The ultrasound revealed a strong, steady heartbeat and internal organs that, while slightly different in structure, appeared functional. The blood samples were sent to the hospital's lab for analysis, though Dr. Patel admitted that the results might not provide clear answers. As the team continued their work, Maggie stroked Theo's scaly head, marveling at the warmth of his skin. He looked up at her with bright, alert eyes, and she felt an overwhelming sense of connection. It didn't matter to her that he didn't look like other babies. He was hers, and she loved him fiercely. News of Theo's birth spread quickly within the hospital, and soon the media caught wind of the story. By the next morning, reporters had gathered outside, their cameras and microphones ready to capture any details they could glean. Headlines began to circulate online. "Mysterious 15-year pregnancy ends with birth of dinosaur-like baby. Unbelievable medical marvel. Woman delivers non-human child. Scientific breakthrough or hoax?" The story of baby Theo. Maggie watched the coverage on the small TV in her hospital room, her heart sinking as she realized the spectacle that was unfolding. She had spent years enduring the judgment of others, and now it seemed the entire world had turned its gaze on her and Theo. Dr. Patel entered the room, his expression troubled. "Maggie, I need to talk to you about what's happening outside. The media is relentless, and there are already people demanding answers. Scientists, government agencies, even private organizations. They want to examine Theo." Maggie's jaw tightened. Examine him? He's a baby, not a science experiment. I understand, Dr. Patel said gently. But this is unprecedented. People are curious and some are scared. I'm doing everything I can to protect your privacy, but I need you to be prepared for what's coming. As the hospital's PR team scrambled to manage the growing media frenzy, Maggie focused on caring for Theo. She learned to feed him with a special bottle designed by the neonatal team to accommodate his small, snout-like mouth. His diet consisted of a nutrient-rich formula that seemed to agree with him, and he began to grow stronger by the day. Despite the chaos outside, Maggie found moments of peace with her son. She sang to him, rocked him to sleep, and marveled at his tiny, clawed fingers as they grasped hers. Theo had a way of looking at her that seemed almost human, as if he understood her love and devotion. One afternoon, as Maggie cradled Theo in her arms, Dr. Patel entered the room with the results of the blood tests. His expression was both excited and apprehensive. "Maggie," he began, "we've never seen anything like this before. Theo's DNA is extraordinary. He shares some genetic similarities with humans, but there are also markers that suggest a connection to prehistoric reptiles. It's as if he's a hybrid, a bridge between species." Maggie's heart raced as she processed his words. "What does that mean? How is this even possible?" Dr. Patel hesitated. "We don't know yet, but there's something else. His genetic makeup shows incredible resilience. His immune system is far stronger than that of a typical human, and his cellular structure seems optimized for growth and adaptation. Theo may be more than just a medical anomaly. He could represent a significant evolutionary leap." Maggie felt a mix of awe and fear. "He's still my baby," she said firmly. "No matter what his DNA says, he's mine." Dr. Patel nodded. "Of course, Maggie. And I'll do everything I can to protect both of you." As days turned into weeks, Theo's presence continued to attract attention. Scientists from prestigious institutions began reaching out, eager to study him and understand his origins. Maggie, however, remained resolute in her decision to shield Theo from becoming a subject of experimentation. One evening, as Maggie was feeding Theo, she received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Eleanor Grant, a renowned evolutionary biologist, had flown in from California after hearing about Theo's birth. Unlike the other scientists who had clamored for access, Dr. Grant approached Maggie with respect and empathy. "Miss Hart," she said softly, "I know you've been overwhelmed by all of this. I can't imagine how difficult it must be. I want you to know that I'm not here to intrude, I'm here to help." Maggie studied the woman, sensing genuine kindness in her eyes. "Help how? I've spent my entire career studying the connections between species, looking for answers to how life evolves and adapts," Dr. Grant explained. "Theo could hold the key to understanding something we've never even considered possible. But more importantly, I want to make sure you both stay safe. If you're willing, I'd like to work with you, not as a scientist studying a subject, but as someone who wants to support you and your son." Maggie felt a glimmer of hope. "You do that? Without trying to take him away from me?" Dr. Grant nodded. "Absolutely. He belongs with you. My role would be to provide guidance and protection, nothing more." After a moment of hesitation, Maggie agreed. She knew she couldn't face the world alone, and having an ally like Dr. Grant felt like a step in the right direction. Under Dr. Grant's guidance, Maggie began to navigate the challenges of raising Theo in a world that didn't understand him. The biologist helped set up a secure space in Maggie's home where Theo could grow and thrive without constant scrutiny. Together, they worked to develop a routine that balanced Theo's unique needs with Maggie's desire to give him a normal, loving upbringing. Theo continued to grow at an astonishing rate, his sharp intelligence becoming more evident with each passing day. He responded to Maggie's voice, learned to grasp objects with surprising dexterity, and even began to mimic sounds. Despite his unusual appearance, Theo's behavior was undeniably childlike, a blend of curiosity and playfulness that filled Maggie's heart with joy. Still, the outside world loomed like a storm cloud on the horizon. Maggie knew it was only a matter of time before she would have to confront the challenges that lay ahead. But for now, she was content to focus on the bond she shared with her son, a bond that no amount of scrutiny or fear could ever break. As the months passed, Theo continued to grow, both physically and mentally. His rapid development astounded Maggie and Dr. Grant, who worked closely to ensure he had everything he needed to thrive. By his 6th month, Theo had outgrown the crib Maggie had prepared for him and was now moving around with surprising agility. His sharp claws, though small, were strong enough to grip objects with precision, and his curious nature meant he was constantly exploring his surroundings. Maggie marveled at her son's progress. Despite his dinosaur-like appearance, Theo was in many ways like any other baby. He giggled when Maggie played peekaboo, reached for her when he wanted comfort, and cried when he was hungry or tired. She had adapted quickly to his unique needs, crafting a safe environment in their home where he could roam freely. One evening, as Maggie watched Theo play with a set of soft blocks, Dr. Grant arrived with a set of specialized learning tools. "I thought these might help him develop his fine motor skills," she explained, laying out a series of puzzles and sensory objects. Maggie smiled, grateful for Dr. Grant's continued support. "Thank you. It's been incredible watching him grow. Every day, he surprises me with something new." Dr. Grant nodded, her gaze softening as she observed Theo. "He's extraordinary, Maggie. And it's clear he's thriving because of you." Despite their efforts to maintain a low profile, the world hadn't forgotten about Theo. The media frenzy had quieted somewhat, but rumors and speculation continued to circulate online. Conspiracy theories ranged from alien involvement to government experiments, and Maggie's name often appeared in sensationalized headlines. Maggie did her best to ignore the noise, focusing instead on building a life for herself and Theo. She leaned on a small circle of trusted friends and neighbors who had come to accept Theo for who he was, not what he looked like. Among them was Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who lived next door and had been one of Maggie's first supporters. "You're a remarkable mother," Mrs. Henderson told her one afternoon as they sat on the porch, watching Theo play in the yard. "It takes a special kind of strength to face the world the way you have." Maggie smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I just want him to be happy. He's my son, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect him." Meanwhile, Dr. Grant continued her research into Theo's origins. She had discreetly taken samples of Theo's DNA, conducting tests in a private lab to avoid drawing unwanted attention. The results were as fascinating as they were confounding. "Theo's genetic makeup is a puzzle," Dr. Grant explained during one of her visits. "He has human DNA, but there are also sequences that don't match anything we've seen before. They're ancient, millions of years old. It's as if he carries a piece of the past within him." Maggie listened intently, her mind racing. "Does that mean he's connected to dinosaurs somehow?" Dr. Grant hesitated before nodding. "It's possible. There's a theory in evolutionary biology called atavism, the re-emergence of traits from an earlier stage in a species' development. Theo might represent an extreme case, where dormant genetic material was somehow activated. But how?" Maggie asked, her voice filled with both wonder and concern. "How could this happen to me?" Dr. Grant looked thoughtful. "Do you remember anything unusual during your pregnancy? Anything that might have triggered this?" Maggie frowned, searching her memory. "There was one thing," she said slowly. "I was on a trip to the Badlands in South Dakota with Paul, my ex-husband. We were hiking and I stumbled upon a strange fossil. It was embedded in the ground, and when I touched it, I felt a weird sensation, like a jolt of energy. I didn't think much of it at the time." Dr. Grant's eyes widened. "That could be significant. If the fossil contained preserved genetic material, it's possible it somehow interacted with your DNA. It's a long shot, but it's the best explanation we have." Maggie stared at her, a mix of disbelief and awe on her face. "So, you're saying Theo might be the result of prehistoric DNA merging with mine?" "It's a theory," Dr. Grant said cautiously. "But one thing is certain, Theo is unique. And he's a reminder of just how much we still don't understand about life and evolution." As Theo grew, his intelligence became increasingly apparent. He began mimicking Maggie's actions, using his claws to stack blocks and even attempting to draw with crayons. His ability to learn and adapt was astonishing, and Maggie couldn't help but wonder what his future would hold. But with Theo's growth came new challenges. His dinosaur-like features made it impossible for him to blend in, and Maggie knew she couldn't keep him hidden forever. She worried about how the world would treat him, whether he would be accepted or feared. One night, as Maggie tucked Theo into his oversized bed, she whispered softly to him, "You're perfect just the way you are, Theo. Don't ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." Theo looked up at her with his bright, intelligent eyes, and Maggie felt a surge of determination. No matter what the future held, she would stand by her son's side and fight for his right to live a happy, fulfilling life. The turning point came when a viral video brought Theo back into the public eye. Maggie had taken him to a secluded park early one morning, hoping to give him a chance to play outside without being seen. Unbeknownst to her, a passerby had recorded a brief clip of Theo climbing a tree with remarkable agility. The video, titled "Dinosaur Child Spotted in Park," spread like wildfire, reigniting public interest and speculation. Within hours, Maggie's phone was inundated with calls and messages from reporters, scientists, and even government officials. The quiet life she had worked so hard to build for Theo was suddenly under threat. Dr. Grant arrived at Maggie's house later that day, her expression grim. "Maggie, we need to act quickly. The attention this video is drawing could put Theo in danger. There are people out there who will want to exploit him." Maggie's heart sank. "What do we do?" Dr. Grant placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out. But whatever happens, you won't face this alone." The days following the viral video were a whirlwind of chaos. Maggie's once quiet life was now under siege. Reporters camped outside her home, their cameras and microphones poised for any glimpse of Theo. Helicopters occasionally buzzed overhead, and curious onlookers gathered in the neighborhood, hoping to catch a glimpse of the so-called dinosaur child. Inside, Maggie felt trapped. She had barricaded the windows and drawn the curtains, creating a fortress of safety for her and Theo. But even as she tried to shield her son from the world's relentless curiosity, she could feel the walls closing in. Dr. Grant had been working tirelessly, coordinating with legal experts and trusted colleagues to develop a plan. She visited daily, bringing food, supplies, and updates on the unfolding situation. "Maggie," Dr. Grant said one afternoon as they sat in the kitchen, "I've spoken to some trusted people in the scientific community. They agree that Theo's safety and well-being must come first. But there's no avoiding it anymore. We need to address the public." Maggie shook her head, her voice trembling with emotion. "I can't let them take him away, Eleanor. He's just a child." "My child." Dr. Grant reached across the table, taking Maggie's hand in hers. "No one is going to take Theo from you. But the longer we stay silent, the more speculation grows. If we can present the truth in a controlled way, we might be able to shift the narrative." After much deliberation, Maggie agreed to hold a press conference under strict conditions. Dr. Grant arranged for the event to take place at a secure location, with limited media access and a team of security personnel to ensure their safety. The goal was simple: to humanize Theo and dispel the fear and misinformation that had taken root in the public's imagination. On the day of the conference, Maggie dressed carefully, choosing a soft, neutral-colored blouse that conveyed warmth and approachability. Theo, now nearly a year old but already the size of a toddler, clung to her side as she prepared to step into the spotlight. His scaly skin glistened under the lights, and his bright eyes darted around the room with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. As they walked onto the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. The journalists, who had been murmuring among themselves moments earlier, now stared in stunned silence. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every detail of Theo's appearance. Maggie took a deep breath, steadying herself as she stepped up to the microphone. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Maggie Hart, and this is my son, Theo." She paused, glancing down at Theo, who was holding tightly to her hand. "Theo is not a monster. He's not an experiment or a conspiracy. He's a child. My child. And like any mother, I want nothing more than to give him a happy, healthy life." The room remained silent as Maggie continued, recounting her pregnancy, the mysterious circumstances of Theo's birth, and the challenges they had faced together. She spoke with a mix of vulnerability and strength, her love for Theo shining through every word. Dr. Grant then took the stage, presenting the scientific findings that had been carefully prepared to address the public's questions. She explained the theory of atavism and the possible connection to Maggie's encounter with the fossil, emphasizing that Theo posed no threat to anyone. "We are witnessing a rare and extraordinary phenomenon," Dr. Grant concluded. "But at the end of the day, Theo is a child. He deserves love, respect, and the chance to grow up without fear or prejudice." The press conference was a turning point. While some skeptics remained vocal, many in the public began to see Theo in a new light. Social media lit up with messages of support, and hashtags like #ProtectTheo and #LoveKnowsNoSpecies trended worldwide. People shared stories of their own experiences with prejudice and acceptance, drawing parallels to Maggie and Theo's journey. For the first time in weeks, Maggie felt a glimmer of hope. She still faced challenges. There were still critics, still those who viewed Theo as an oddity rather than a child, but the tide was beginning to turn. As the media frenzy began to subside, Maggie focused on creating a sense of normalcy for Theo. With Dr. Grant's help, she enrolled him in a specialized early education program designed for children with unique needs. The program provided a safe environment for Theo to learn and interact with others, and Maggie was relieved to see him thriving. Theo's intelligence continued to astound everyone who worked with him. He quickly mastered puzzles and demonstrated a remarkable ability to mimic speech, his voice a soft, chirping sound that was uniquely his own. Despite his dinosaur-like appearance, his personality was undeniably human, curious, playful, and affectionate. One afternoon, as Maggie watched Theo build a tower of blocks, she felt a deep sense of pride. He had come so far, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But not everyone was ready to accept Theo. One evening, Maggie received a letter in the mail, an anonymous note filled with hateful words and threats. Her heart sank as she read it, the fear and anger bubbling to the surface. Dr. Grant was quick to act, contacting law enforcement and increasing security measures around Maggie's home. "This is exactly why we need to keep fighting," Dr. Grant said firmly. "People fear what they don't understand. But fear can be replaced with knowledge, and with love." Maggie nodded, her resolve strengthening. She refused to let hatred dictate her son's life. Theo had brought so much joy and wonder into the world, and she was determined to protect him, no matter the cost. As the months continued to pass, Theo's story became a symbol of resilience, acceptance, and the enduring bond between a mother and her child. Maggie had learned to navigate the balance between protecting Theo from the world's harsh judgment and sharing his story in a way that inspired compassion and understanding. The threats and hate mail still trickled in, but Maggie refused to let them dictate her life. Instead, she focused on the outpouring of support from people who saw Theo for what he truly was, a remarkable child with a unique story. Letters from parents of children with disabilities and differences began to arrive, each one thanking Maggie for her courage and sharing how Theo's story had given them hope. One day, Maggie received a letter from a teacher in a small town. The letter described how her students had been captivated by Theo's story and had started a project called "What Makes Us Unique." The students wrote essays and created art about their own differences, celebrating what made each of them special. Maggie was deeply moved. She wrote back to the teacher, expressing her gratitude and sending a picture of Theo to share with the class. It was moments like these that reminded her of the impact her son was having on the world. Meanwhile, Theo's development continued to astound everyone around him. By the time he was 2 years old, he had outgrown most of the furniture in Maggie's home, his rapid growth a constant reminder of his unique nature. His intelligence and dexterity were equally remarkable. He could solve puzzles designed for much older children and had even started using a simplified form of sign language to communicate. Dr. Grant visited regularly, documenting Theo's progress and providing Maggie with guidance. "He's exceeding every expectation," Dr. Grant said one afternoon as she observed Theo assembling a complex puzzle. "His cognitive abilities are extraordinary. He's not just learning, he's innovating." Maggie watched her son with a mixture of pride and awe. "He's incredible," she said softly, "but sometimes I worry about what the future holds. How will the world treat him when he's older? Dr. Grant placed a reassuring hand on Maggie's shoulder. We'll face it together, she said. Theo has you, and he has a growing community of people who believe in him. That's more than most could ask for. As Theo grew, Maggie decided it was time to give him more opportunities to explore the world. With Dr. Grant's help, she arranged for private outings to parks and museums during off hours, ensuring Theo could experience new environments without the scrutiny of strangers. These outings became a highlight for both mother and son, allowing Theo to run, play, and discover the wonders of the world around him. One such outing was to a nearby nature reserve. Theo was fascinated by the trees, streams, and wildlife, his sharp eyes catching details that Maggie often missed. At one point, he crouched down near a patch of wildflowers, his claws gently brushing against the petals as he let out a series of soft chirps. He's so curious, Maggie said to Dr. Grant, who had joined them for the trip. It's like he sees the world in a way we can't. Dr. Grant nodded, smiling. That curiosity is going to take him far. He's a natural explorer. Despite their efforts to keep Theo's outings private, there were still moments when they encountered strangers. During one visit to a secluded park, a young boy and his father happened upon Theo as he played near a stream. The boy, no older than 5, stared wide-eyed at Theo before tugging on his father's sleeve. Dad looked. It's a dinosaur, the boy exclaimed, his voice filled with excitement rather than fear. The father froze, his gaze shifting between Theo and Maggie. Maggie braced herself, expecting judgment or hostility. Instead, the man crouched down to his son's level, placing a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. That's not just any dinosaur, the father said with a smile. That's Theo. And he's a pretty special guy. Maggie's heart swelled with relief and gratitude. She approached the man and his son, offering a tentative smile. Thank you, she said softly. The man nodded. We've read about you and Theo. My son loves dinosaurs, and when he heard Theo's story, he couldn't stop talking about how cool it was. You're doing an amazing job. For the rest of the afternoon, Theo played alongside the boy, their laughter echoing through the park. It was a simple moment, but for Maggie, it was a glimpse of the acceptance she hoped the world could one day offer her son. As Theo approached his 3rd birthday, Maggie and Dr. Grant decided it was time to take a bold step. They began planning a public event that would celebrate Theo's uniqueness while educating the public about the science behind his existence. The goal was to shift the narrative from fear and curiosity to understanding and appreciation. The event, called Theo's World, was held at a local museum with limited tickets available to ensure a safe and controlled environment. The exhibit featured interactive displays about evolution, genetics, and the connection between humans and prehistoric life. Dr. Grant gave a keynote presentation explaining the theory of atavism and Theo's role in helping scientists explore new frontiers of understanding. Maggie, meanwhile, shared her personal journey, speaking candidly about the challenges and joys of raising Theo. Her words were met with tears, applause, and an outpouring of support from the audience. When Theo was brought onto the stage, the crowd erupted into cheers. Maggie held his hand as he looked out at the sea of faces, his bright eyes filled with wonder. For the first time, Maggie felt a sense of peace. Theo was no longer just a curiosity or a headline, he was a symbol of resilience, love, and the beauty of life's mysteries. The success of Theo's World marked a turning point for both Maggie and her son. The event was widely praised not just for its scientific insights but also for its heartfelt message about acceptance and love. News outlets covered the story with a newfound sensitivity, focusing on Maggie's bravery and Theo's uniqueness rather than sensationalizing their lives. For the first time since Theo's birth, Maggie felt a sense of relief. The world seemed to be changing, slowly but surely, as more people began to see Theo not as a spectacle, but as a symbol of life's extraordinary possibilities. In the weeks following the event, Maggie received invitations from schools, universities, and community organizations asking her to share her story. At first, she hesitated, worried about how Theo might handle the increased attention. But Dr. Grant encouraged her, pointing out the importance of continuing to shift public perception. This is bigger than just you and Theo, Dr. Grant said during one of their conversations. You have the power to inspire people, to teach them about acceptance and the wonders of life's diversity. Theo's story can change hearts and minds. Maggie agreed, and soon she found herself speaking at events across the country. She brought Theo with her whenever possible, allowing him to experience new places and meet people who were eager to learn about him. At every event, Theo charmed the audience with his intelligence, curiosity, and gentle nature. One particularly memorable visit was to an elementary school, where Maggie spoke to a group of wide-eyed students about her journey as Theo's mother. After her talk, the children were given a chance to ask questions. "Does Theo like toys?" one girl asked, her voice filled with innocent curiosity. Maggie smiled. "He loves toys, especially blocks and puzzles. He's very good at building things." Another child raised his hand. "Can Theo be my friend?" Maggie's heart melted. "Theo would love to be your friend," she said. "He's just like any other child. He loves to play and make friends." After the session, the children presented Maggie with drawings they had made of Theo, each one capturing his dinosaur-like features with vibrant colors and happy expressions. Maggie carefully packed the drawings into her bag, feeling a renewed sense of hope for the future. As Theo continued to grow, so did his abilities. By the time he was 4 years old, he was speaking in full sentences, his voice a unique blend of chirps and human-like tones. He had developed a keen interest in building structures, often spending hours creating intricate towers and models from blocks and other materials. Dr. Grant, who had become a close family friend, suggested introducing Theo to more advanced learning tools. "He has an extraordinary mind," she said. "We should nurture it and see where his interests take him." Maggie agreed, and soon Theo was enrolled in a specialized program that combined early education with hands-on exploration. The program's teachers were carefully selected for their expertise and open-mindedness, ensuring Theo would be supported and encouraged. Theo thrived in the program. He quickly became a favorite among the teachers, who marveled at his ability to grasp complex concepts and solve problems with creativity and precision. His classmates, though initially cautious, soon embraced him as one of their own, drawn to his playful energy and kind demeanor. One day, as Maggie picked Theo up from school, his teacher pulled her aside. "Maggie, I just wanted to let you know how much of a positive influence Theo has been on the other children. He's taught them so much about acceptance and empathy. It's truly amazing to see." Maggie felt a swell of pride. "Thank you," she said. "That means the world to me." Despite the progress they had made, Maggie knew there would always be challenges. There were still moments when strangers stared or whispered, and she occasionally received messages from people who couldn't understand or accept Theo's existence. But Maggie had grown stronger, her love for her son giving her the courage to face whatever came their way. One such challenge arose when a prominent scientist published a controversial article questioning whether Theo's existence posed a risk to humanity. The article suggested that his unique genetics could lead to unforeseen consequences and called for stricter oversight of Maggie's parenting. The article sparked heated debate, with some people siding with the scientist and others rallying behind Maggie and Theo. Social media became a battleground, with hashtags like #TheoIsFamily and #LeaveTheoAlone trending alongside more critical commentary. Maggie refused to let the negativity consume her. Instead, she focused on the people who supported her and Theo, drawing strength from their kindness and encouragement. Dr. Grant also stepped forward, publishing a rebuttal to the article that emphasized Theo's humanity and the importance of treating him with dignity and respect. "Theo is not a threat," Dr. Grant wrote. "He is a child, a remarkable, intelligent, and loving child. He reminds us of the incredible diversity of life and the importance of embracing the unknown with open hearts and minds." The article went viral, receiving widespread praise for its thoughtful and compassionate perspective. It helped shift the conversation back to one of acceptance and understanding, reinforcing the message that Theo was more than just a scientific curiosity, he was a symbol of hope. As Theo approached his 5th birthday, Maggie began planning a small celebration to mark the occasion. She invited a few close friends, Dr. Grant, and Theo's classmates and their families. The party was held in a local park, where Theo could run and play freely. The day was filled with laughter, games, and plenty of cake. Theo beamed with joy as he opened his presents, each one carefully chosen to match his interests. Maggie watched him with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by the love and support that surrounded them. As the sun began to set, Maggie gathered everyone together for a moment of gratitude. "Thank you all for being here," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside her. "Theo and I are so lucky to have each of you in our lives. Your kindness and acceptance mean more than I can ever say." Dr. Grant stepped forward, raising a glass. "To Theo," she said, "a reminder that life is full of surprises, and those surprises often turn out to be the most beautiful gifts of all." The group raised their glasses, and Theo let out a happy chirp, his bright eyes shining with excitement. Maggie looked at her son, her heart full as she thought about the journey they had taken together. It hadn't been easy, but every challenge, every triumph, had brought them closer to this moment. A moment of love, joy, and the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities. The weeks after Theo's 5th birthday were filled with new milestones and opportunities for growth. Theo's boundless energy and insatiable curiosity kept Maggie on her toes, but she wouldn't have had it any other way. Watching her son thrive filled her with a sense of purpose and pride that outweighed any lingering doubts or fears. One of the most exciting developments came when Theo began showing a deep fascination with nature and animals. Maggie often found him gazing out the window, chirping softly at the birds that visited their garden. He seemed to have an innate connection to the natural world, a sensitivity that made him uniquely attuned to the rhythms of life around him. Dr. Grant noticed this during one of her visits. "Maggie, have you thought about introducing Theo to more structured experiences with nature?" she asked. "He might benefit from learning in an environment where he can interact with animals and ecosystems." Maggie loved the idea. She reached out to a nearby wildlife sanctuary, explaining Theo's unique situation and asking if they would be open to private visits. To her surprise, the sanctuary's director, a kind and enthusiastic woman named Karen, welcomed the idea. "We'd be honored to have Theo here," Karen said during their first phone call. "Every creature has a place in the world, and Theo's no different. I think he'll love it." Their first visit to the sanctuary was unforgettable. Theo's eyes lit up as he entered the expansive grounds, his small hands gripping Maggie's tightly as they walked through the gates. The sanctuary was home to a variety of animals: birds of prey, rescued mammals, and even reptiles. Theo's fascination was immediate. As they approached a large enclosure housing a group of tortoises, Theo crouched down, his head tilting as he studied the slow, deliberate movements of the creatures. He chirped softly, a sound Maggie had come to recognize as his way of expressing wonder. Karen knelt beside him, speaking in a gentle tone. "Tortoises are ancient creatures, Theo. They've been around for millions of years, just like the dinosaurs you remind us of. They're survivors, just like you." Theo looked up at her, his bright eyes sparkling with understanding. He reached out a clawed hand, gently touching the edge of the enclosure as if to connect with the tortoises on some instinctual level. Maggie watched the interaction with tears in her eyes. Seeing Theo so at ease, so connected to the world around him, filled her with a deep sense of peace. For the first time, she felt like they were beginning to find their place in the world. The visits to the sanctuary became a regular part of their routine. Karen and her team worked closely with Maggie and Theo, creating opportunities for him to learn and grow in a safe, supportive environment. Theo quickly developed favorites among the animals, particularly a young hawk named Ember and a massive iguana named Gus. The staff often joked that Theo had a way of communicating with the animals, his chirps and clicks drawing curious responses from his feathered and scaled friends. One day, Karen approached Maggie with an idea. "We're planning to expand our educational programs to include sessions for children with unique needs. I was wondering if Theo might like to be part of it." Maggie hesitated, unsure if Theo was ready for such a public role. But Karen's enthusiasm was contagious, and she assured Maggie that the program would be carefully designed to protect Theo's privacy and comfort. "We want Theo to inspire others, just like he's inspired us," Karen said. "His story can teach children about acceptance, diversity, and the beauty of differences." Maggie agreed, and soon Theo became a central figure in the sanctuary's educational program. His interactions with the animals captivated the children who attended, many of whom found themselves drawn to his gentle nature and unique charm. For Maggie, watching Theo thrive in this new role was nothing short of miraculous. Despite the progress they had made, Maggie knew their journey was far from over. Challenges still arose, particularly as Theo's rapid growth continued to set him apart. By the time he was 6, he was nearly the size of an adult, his strength and agility making him a force to be reckoned with. Maggie worked tirelessly to ensure their home and routine adapted to his needs, but she often worried about what the future would hold. One night, as Maggie and Dr. Grant sat together in the living room, discussing Theo's progress, Maggie voiced her concerns. "Eleanor, what happens when Theo grows too big for me to handle on my own? What if the world can't accept him the way I do?" Dr. Grant leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "Maggie, Theo is extraordinary. He's already overcome so many obstacles, and he has you to guide him. But you're right, we need to start thinking about the long term. That's why I've been working on something I think could help." She pulled out a folder filled with documents and diagrams. "I've been collaborating with a group of architects and scientists to design a living space that's tailored to Theo's needs. It's a sanctuary, a place where he can live, learn, and thrive without fear of judgment or harm." Maggie flipped through the pages, her heart racing as she saw the plans. The sanctuary was a sprawling facility set in a remote, wooded area, complete with living quarters, educational spaces, and areas for exploration and play. It was designed not just for Theo, but for other children with unique needs who might one day benefit from such a place. "It's incredible," Maggie said, her voice filled with emotion. "But how will we make it happen?" Dr. Grant smiled. "We've already started fundraising, and the response has been overwhelming. People believe in Theo's story, Maggie. They want to help." As the plans for the sanctuary moved forward, Maggie found herself filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Theo's journey had been marked by challenges, but it had also brought incredible opportunities that could now extend to others like him. For the first time, she felt like they were building not just a future for Theo, but a legacy that would endure long after their story began. As the sanctuary's construction neared completion, Maggie marveled at how far their journey had taken them. What had once been a life defined by fear and uncertainty was now filled with hope, purpose, and a sense of belonging. The sanctuary, named Theo's Haven, was more than just a safe space for her son. It was a testament to resilience, acceptance, and the enduring strength of a mother's love. The day of the grand opening was a celebration unlike any other. Supporters from all over the country gathered to witness the culmination of years of effort and dedication. Maggie stood at the entrance, holding Theo's hand as they welcomed the crowd. At 7 years old, Theo had grown into a striking figure, his dinosaur-like features no longer shocking but instead inspiring awe and admiration. Dr. Grant took to the stage to address the attendees, her voice filled with emotion. "Theo's Haven is not just a sanctuary for one extraordinary boy, it's a beacon of hope for anyone who has ever felt different or misunderstood. It's a reminder that our differences are what make us beautiful and that every life, no matter how unique, deserves love and respect." The audience erupted into applause, and Maggie felt tears welling in her eyes. She looked down at Theo, who was chirping softly and clapping his clawed hands together, clearly delighted by the energy of the crowd. When it was her turn to speak, Maggie stepped forward, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I never imagined we'd come this far," she began. "When Theo was born, I was scared of what the world would think, scared of how I would protect him. But Theo has taught me that love is stronger than fear. He's shown me that the things that make us different are the very things that make us special." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "This sanctuary isn't just for Theo, it's for every child, every family, and every person who has ever felt like they didn't belong. It's a place where everyone is welcome, where we can celebrate the beauty of our differences together." The applause was deafening, and Maggie felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She knew that none of this would have been possible without the unwavering support of Dr. Grant, Karen, and the countless others who had believed in Theo's story. In the months that followed, Theo's Haven became a thriving community. Families from all walks of life brought their children to the sanctuary, finding solace and support in the inclusive environment. Theo quickly became a beloved figure, his natural curiosity and playful spirit endearing him to everyone he met. Maggie watched with pride as her son explored the sanctuary's sprawling grounds, his laughter echoing through the trees. He had found his place in the world, a place where he could be himself without fear or judgment. Dr. Grant continued to work closely with Maggie, developing educational programs and expanding the sanctuary's reach. They collaborated with scientists, educators, and advocates, ensuring that Theo's Haven remained at the forefront of promoting acceptance and understanding. As for Maggie, she found her voice as an advocate, traveling the country to share her story and inspire others. Her book, Theo's World, A Mother's Journey, became a bestseller, touching hearts and sparking conversations about love, resilience, and the power of embracing the unknown. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maggie sat with Theo on the porch of their home at the sanctuary. He leaned against her, his head resting on her shoulder as they watched the fireflies dance in the fading light. "Mom," Theo said softly, his voice a mix of chirps and words. "Are you happy?" Maggie smiled, wrapping her arm around him. "I'm the happiest I've ever been, Theo. You've given me a life I never could have imagined. A life full of love, adventure, and meaning." Theo looked up at her, his bright eyes shining. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too," Maggie replied, her heart full. "More than anything." As they sat together, surrounded by the peace and beauty of the sanctuary, Maggie felt a deep sense of contentment. Their journey had been long and challenging, but it had led them to this moment. A moment of joy, connection, and the promise of a future filled with endless possibilities. Theo's story had touched countless lives, but for Maggie, the greatest gift was the bond they shared, a bond that no amount of scrutiny or fear could ever break. And as the stars began to twinkle above, Maggie knew that Theo's Haven was more than just a sanctuary. It was a legacy of love, a reminder that the extraordinary could be found in the most unexpected places, and a testament to the power of a mother's unwavering devotion.